the learning and the networking and the somewhat strange but delightful feeling of being surrounded by people continues for one last day. For those who don't know me, I'm Angus Winchester, I'm the Education Director for BCB, and I hope you're enjoying the educational program I've curated over these 3 days, as we've tried to cover key topics that are useful and necessary and interesting for the modern hospitality community, and today is definitely no exception. Some basic housekeeping. You can take your masks off when sitting here if you want to, but when I come around with a microphone later on for questions, if you put the mask back on, just so I don't have to sterilise the microphone each time, that would be fantastic. I'm not going to be giving long bios and long introductions, and yet I always do this and I always go on, so I'm a liar from that point of view, but the biographies for the people are all online in your manuals and things like that. And finally, if you could take your trash with you when you leave and recycle it out there, the people who did my sustainability session yesterday and my back would be much happier. So, I've always believed in the concept of a meritocracy, and would claim that I do not see superficial differences like the colour of your skin, or gender, or sexual preference as being in any way indicative of one's ability to be an expert, or to lead, or to manage a team. But I'm also increasingly aware of the privilege that I, as a white, English-speaking, heterosexual man, enjoy in the world today. And to that end, I try to seek out and celebrate people and stories that educate me and others, and provide guidance or inspiration to people that don't look like me, or enjoy the same benefits that me, or my, in this case gender, afford me. When I read this submission, I knew I'd found such a story and a voice, and I hope it's useful and interesting to our industry as a whole. I'd like to introduce Julian Robbins, and away she goes.
Hi everybody, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you Angus for that wonderful introduction. Like you said, my name is Julian, and I'm originally from the United States. I'm from Philadelphia, but I've spent the past almost decade living in Tel Aviv, Israel. And almost immediately after I say that, I get some of these questions. Really, you don't have to read them. It's just an example of the amount of questions I'm asked immediately after I share that little tidbit of information about myself. And I'd like to share my story, my journey, and what I've learned along the way. Like I said, I live in Tel Aviv, Israel, and I moved there when I was 19 years old. I had spent a year there, part of a gap year program, and I just liked who I was there. And I wanted to remain there, and I looked to my left and looked to my right, and I wanted to be authentically in Tel Aviv, in Israel, and I saw that other 19-year-olds were drafting into their conscript service. So I decided to do the same. So I'll say this one more time. I moved half around the world to a country whose language I did not speak, with no family whatsoever, to join the military. And it was actually during the time that I was in the military, I started working behind the bar. Like many people and many stories we've heard before, I started in the dingiest, grossest dive bar. I'm not even sure how it was allowed to operate, to be perfectly honest. And I loved it. And from there I was kind of hooked. I moved around in the industry. I then went to work at a small boutique hotel bar, American-style sports bar, cafes, restaurants, a late-night industry bar. And when I say late-night industry bar, I'll just say this little tidbit to display how late-night. We were open until last customer. That meant if last customer was coming in before their flight, came in with their trolley, their luggage, for a drink, and their flight wasn't until 10 a.m., we were open until 10 a.m. until that person went to the flight. And I gathered all these experiences, I learned what I could, I was really hungry. Everything that I went to, I knew that I could learn something else from it. But I still didn't feel satisfied. And I wanted to be the best bartender that I could be. Again, so I looked to the right, I looked to the left, and went to the place that I thought that did that the best, that created the best bartenders in Tel Aviv. I wanted to be a cocktail bartender. And so, I went to the Imperial Brew. At the time, I started my studies, I was in pursuit of a degree in counterterrorism and conflict resolution. And I was offered the opportunity to be a part-time hostess. So let's just give you a time frame. This was April 2018, and I'm hostessing for the Imperial Group at two of their bars, two of their locations. The Imperial Craft Cocktail Bar, which is I'm proud to say world-renowned, and La Otra. I'll take a moment this time to explain what is La Otra, because this is much more a part of my story. La Otra is a Caribbean and Mexican-style cocktail bar located on the other side of the lobby in the Imperial Hotel. The Imperial Craft Cocktail Bar is, as you guys can assume, in the lobby of the Imperial Hotel, and La Otra itself means the other. A big part of its identity is also a slang term that I learned. It also means the mistress. So you guys probably have never heard of it, and that's kind of our MO. We're kind of the best kept secret, not gonna lie, I'm pretty proud to say that. And on top of that, maybe I can even say I'm in La Otra's best kept secret as well. I continued working part-time as a hostess. It was extremely humbling to go through that process, and honestly, it's the best way that I learned how to be a full, dynamic team member and staff member. I dealt with the reservations, I dealt with the greeting, I dealt with the seatings. It gave me much more of a macro perspective in the service. Whereas previously, it was very micro. It was who was sitting in front of me in the bar, what drinks was I making, what was the next part of my priority list of the tables I was serving. And I needed to look at the evening as a whole. But I wasn't done learning, and I wanted to return back to nightlife. I stopped going to class, I told you. I was in the middle of pursuing my degree, and let's just say that it didn't go very far. And after a lot of, I would say bothering, because I never liked to impose, but being just very eager, I was presented with the opportunity to join the bar crew there. Now, as a part of the bar crew in La Otra, we do everything. There's not a differentiation between server or bartender. Our bartenders start on the floor, and then that is part of our training program. So you are not a waiter, you're not a bartender, everyone's called a bartender, and maybe you're just in the beginning of your training. Let's fast forward to June 2019, so it's about 6 months. I've joined the staff, I've started my training program, and I'm given the opportunity to pass my bar exam. And I become La Otra's 3rd female bartender, and I join the ranks of the 8 female bartenders that have worked for the Imperial Group. I want to say that one more time, just so that it's clear. 3, I'm the 3rd female bartender, and the 8th female bartender in the entire group. Thank you very much. This was harder than any university exam that I ever took, and I'm just really proud of myself. I just want to say that out loud in public, just get that off my chest. And after a little over a year of being a part of the La Otra team, as a full-fledged veteran bartender, I begin to recognize a few things that are special about what we do. We had a lovely dynamic that happened naturally. There weren't any headhunters, this wasn't designed that way, but I was working with a group of people who were all passionate about a different aspect of hospitality, a different aspect of bartending and education. For example, we had that premier, prime, star tender, flair tender competitor, and we had someone who was more interested in research and development, and somebody who was more interested in history and knowledge and all the things that you would go study with the books. And so as we had trainees join our staff, they had their point person, and it happened rather naturally, and it created a very nice environment that we supported each other and we grew together. I haven't experienced anything like it ever in my life in any place that I've ever worked, and I don't know anybody else, to the best of my knowledge, who can pull off of, like, out of their hat, that kind of experience and that kind of, like, being that fortunate, I guess you could say, to be surrounded by such a lovely group of people. With that came the side of having a lot of unspoken rules and traditions. We would take under our wing that new trainee, that new staff member, and shape them and sculpt them to be a ultra bartender. But we did it by feeling. We did it by experience and just sharing, having the common goal to be the best that we could be. And so I'm going to skip a few things. I think I've covered a little bit of how I've learned and grown. And we're going to fast forward to last August. Last August, amidst all of COVID, amidst this pandemic, I am given the greatest opportunity, and that is to manage the La Ultra team. I go from having this very experienced staff that I shared with you that we were learning and growing and taking care of each other together to, because of the pandemic, like many of you guys have seen and experienced, having no bar team, no experience, no veteran. Everybody found themselves continuing on in their career and their journey. And I had to say goodbye to a lot of my friends. Not had to, but I was put in the position to say goodbye to a lot of my friends as they went on to further their university degrees or manage a different bar or enter in a partnership for ownership of other areas. Now, I said that we had unspoken rules and traditions. I had no team and no support, none of that dynamic that I spoke about to train the next generation. And nothing was written down. We had a few things here and there, a few checklists, but we had really depended on this open line of communication and just this innate desire to support each other and to be better. And I needed to figure out what to do. I needed to rebuild almost everything, and I had about 2 trainees who were coming along on my journey. When putting together this presentation, I needed to reflect on, through reflecting on what I experienced, I realized that these are, I guess you could say, 4 pillars of what my style of management and leadership is. And I'm going to give you guys examples of how that what be exemplified in my day-to-day experiences. And we'll see later on about how and why this matters to the industry as a whole, and will impact each and every one of you as well. So we talk about commitment. So we're in lockdown like everybody else, on and off. The government decides at the drop of a hat when we're allowed to close, when we're allowed to open. And I have sort of a program that is for training that is heavily reliant on day-to-day operations, for us being operational. A lot of shadowing, a lot of examples, and none of that is relevant any longer. The one thing that remains relevant, and the one thing that I feel the most confident in doing, is our bar technique training. So we flip everything up on its head, and we start off with intense bar tech training. So that means round building and how to literally hold a jigger, the proper way to lift up a bottle, to not hurt your elbow or to not hurt your shoulder, how to be smart, what to prioritize and when. And because we're in lockdown, because we're on mandated, I forgot the word in English, excuse me, 1 second. It's amusing, since English is my native language. Mandated unemployment, thank you. The people that I'm meeting with are giving me commitment, and I know that I don't need to meet them halfway in that level of commitment. I need to match their level of commitment. So we start meeting 3 to 5 times a week with these 2 people, and I'm meeting with them one-on-one. It's very tailored, and it gives us a lot of flexibility. I guess that's the silver lining on this, that whatever they felt that they needed to work on, and whatever benchmark they were not hitting, we had the flexibility to cater to that since we were not open. I think it's really, really important for me to share this level of commitment I don't challenge you guys to match it, because looking back at it, what I did was kind of insane. But when I tell you that I met with them 3 to 5 times a week while we were on government unemployment, not getting paid nothing, these other staff members had odd jobs that they were picking up so that they could make rent. But the rule was that we had 3 days that were set in stone. One of those 3 days fell on my birthday, and one of my trainees was like, no, it's okay, it's no big deal, you celebrate your birthday. And I said, no, it doesn't matter that, like, technically nothing's open, we can't do anything, we're gonna come on my birthday. That's how committed I am to you, that, honestly, who am I, the Queen of England? Who gives 2 shits that it's my birthday? I want you to continue on your journey and reach your goals. So that meant there was no public transportation. I took myself, I brought my dog, and my boyfriend wanted to spend my entire day, and we did our 40-minute walk to the bar so that we could train for an hour and a half, 2 hours that day. Excuse me. Slowly but surely, we gained a group of people who were joining our bar, our trainee program to reopen. You might ask why I was doing this one-on-one training instead of something that was more like a boot camp system where you would, before everyone opens, I don't know if you guys have been a part of an opening staff or a bar, but in my experience, you come in for a few days, group training, tastings, etc. Well, I didn't even have that resource. I didn't have a group of people who wanted to join my staff. I had 1 person, I had 2 people, then I had a 3rd person. This was going on weeks at a time. Nobody knew what was happening. People had also left the city. They couldn't make rent, so I had people who were commuting, especially borrowing their parents' car to drive 40 minutes to meet me for 2 hours 3 times a week because they were committed. So there was no way that I was going to match their commitment. Let's move on to, I guess, caring. I've been told that I care too much. It's something I've been told for years. It's something I was told by my bosses. And I'm sorry, I hate to break it to you guys. I care exactly the right amount. I might not know the right moment to share with you what I think needs to be done or changed. I might have like this impulse to be like, I care about this, let me share about it with you now. And that's something I recognize I need to work on. But I definitely don't care too much. And I have proof, seen a few slides about how I know for certain I got confirmation verification that I definitely don't care too much. When I say about caring, the first thing that comes to mind is something that I learned from one of the wisest people I've ever met in my life. That's my grandmother. She raised 5 children, and she was once asked how she loves all of her children equally. How she loves all of her children the same. And her answer, point blank, was that she didn't, that she doesn't. She then reassured that she does love all of her children, but she just loves all of her children the amount that they need, the amount that's required for them to feel loved, and that each one of her children are different. So I applied that to my bartenders, who I affectionately call my baby bartenders. So I applied this to my baby bartenders in training. And while I do think I love them all the same, I definitely don't care for them all the same. They all are individuals who need something else from me, who need a different kind of caring, a different amount of caring, and I need to respect that and be true to that. When I was finally collecting my staff and doing that initial onboarding conversation after they'd gone through the interview process and getting to know them, I always ended this initial conversation with the same question, which was, what is your goal that you would like to achieve in the Ultra group? What is your desire right now to accomplish in Ultra? And I realized that none of them had ever been asked this before. They would never experience somebody asking them point blank, what do you want? How can I give you what you want? How can I help you create a way for you to achieve a goal? Everybody was a little bit surprised, and I told them, don't worry, you don't have to answer me right now, but there's no way you're not going to give me an answer to this question. Take a day, take a month, we'll revisit this, and I will offer my help for you to find an answer to this question, but I want you to try and answer it yourself first, so it is authentic to you as possible, so that it is most true to what you want. Because I can direct you, but I might end up accidentally tainting that by my own goals, and I don't want to do that. When I talk about being supportive, we finally got the opportunity to reopen almost full-time this past spring. And I went through all this tech training with everybody, this one-on-one, this tailor-made intensive bartending tutoring. But they had never worked together. They never actually needed to open the bar, to prep all of the stuff. So we had to practice, and I needed to share with them. I was used to having this dynamic and the support of these experienced bartenders that I didn't have. And it was just me. So I was there like many other bar managers all day, hours and hours and hours, from prepping hours, so that they could feel as prepared and as secure to succeed during their first shifts and their second shifts. And then when these more experienced bartenders had the next little mini generation come by, and it was then I wanted to delegate to them the responsibility of teaching them what I had taught this first group, and they came to me honestly and said, we need help with that. We don't want to do something wrong. We want your assistance to continue this training. We don't want to do the first shadow shift. So I was there again for the next group of people. And the same thing happened with closing. Closing hours came around, counting the register, closing the bar, etc., etc. So I was there in the morning and I was there at night. And then I was there at 4 a.m. when I had a bartender who couldn't figure out what he was doing wrong regarding the register. He had taken a step back from this process, thought maybe he drank a few too many shots with guests, and that's not uncommon, especially in Israel, because it is part of our expectation to drink with our guests. It's part of our hosting, it's part of being this warm, Middle Eastern, welcoming host and being hospitable. In fact, we've been called rude for not lifting that shot glass with them. We've gotten bad reviews for refusing to drink, so he was responsible enough to say, maybe wait, maybe I've had too much, and reassess about an hour, 45 minutes later. And it still wasn't working, but he knew that he had my support, so he called me up on the phone, and I made my way from my bed to the living room to be kind to my boyfriend and not wake him up, and we got on FaceTime and we walked through all the steps of closing, all the steps of counting the register, so that he felt that he was doing the right thing and he was doing his job to the best of his ability. I kept this open communication open, so that when, again, we had a amusing circumstance where somebody couldn't find a key to one of the doors, and they called me, and again, I came back to the bar at 3 a.m. To find the key in the door that he couldn't find. It was just in the door. I was still happy to do it. I mean, I definitely poked fun at him, I definitely rolled my eyes at him, but I always wanted to lead by example in that sense. If I was going to support them, they were going to support their staff, and then that dynamic that I grew in La Ultra was going to hopefully organically come back. In terms of being an advocate for my staff, I've seen a lot of times the challenge between bar manager wanting to align their goals and their responsibilities to the bar ownership, the bar partners, versus the responsibility they have to their crew and to their staff. And I didn't want to make the mistake of not giving my bartenders a voice and support in front of management and staff. I think everybody's always trying their hardest to find that balance, but in such a sensitive time and in such an unprecedented time where these are new people who don't owe us anything, who are just trying to get a job again and get paid again, I needed to have their backs. While I do recognize that obviously this is a business and there are business-related decisions that need to be made, we have individuals, we have personnel, we have people that are behind these employees. They're not just a job title that they are stepping into, and I am now a bartender. No, your entire complete person. Advocating was in funny ways, like the 3-year journey I went on to get women's uniforms. We had our uniforms, a t-shirt, and it was just always a, I would say in quotations, a unisex shirt that I hated wearing. I felt like I looked like I was either in some combination of pajamas or that I had forgotten my uniform that day and borrowed somebody else's top, and that's not putting my best foot forward. That's kind of putting another little mini hurdle, I'd say, to put things all in perspective, in front of me doing the best of my ability, the best job that I can do. And so I was so happy when I got the approval for the new design of shirts, and I had a range of sizes that fit somebody who was extra small, petite, all the way up to our 2-meter, 12-centimeter tall bartender. Everybody was going to have a shirt that they felt comfortable in, that they felt confident in to wear, proud to wear. I mean, it's our uniform. Shouldn't we feel proud to put that on when we go into our shift? I would like to circle back around to a few things that I did throughout our lockdown that hone in on the honestly looking back at it now and saying it out loud, I've never said this out loud before, but the extreme measures that I went to when we were in complete lockdown, like we literally could not leave. It was illegal to leave our homes at the time. I had finally set up a Zoom session for at that time period, 5 people to meet and to learn, discuss, and grow. And one of my staff members came to me and said, "Thank you very much for doing this, but I'm not getting all the things that you want me to get out of this. And also thank you very much for sending me all of the resources that you're finding that are now open and free, that all of these places are posting online, all of these companies are giving, but it's not in a language that I speak, and I'm having a really hard time learning. I'm having a really hard time understanding. I see that it's there for me, and I need it to be in Hebrew. How can you make that happen?" I do speak Hebrew. I did learn Hebrew, but I was definitely not the person to fulfill that wish of his. So I looked literally in my right to my boyfriend, who was sitting at the couch at the time, because remember, we can't leave our apartments, who is bilingual and does have experience in instructing bartenders. He worked for the oldest bartending school in Israel. And I said, "Honey, you don't have a choice. You're gonna help me with this." We created an entire presentation, and he translated it for me to Hebrew. And then I said, "Okay, now that you did that for me, surprise, you're actually gonna get on Zoom and do it for me for these other 4 bartenders." And one of the sessions even happened while I was in quarantine. I had recently returned from the States after mourning the loss of my aunt, and I was stuck to my 4 walls of my bedroom. He was in the living room. We both got on the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi did not like that, and he did a whole Zoom session on the history of vodka and modern cocktails in Hebrew. So while I'm supportive and I'm caring and I'm committed, I see that in my personal life and in my professional life, it's definitely balanced out again, which I'm really honored to have happen. Now, I talked about all these things that I did a little bit faster actually than I expected to, but no worries. And what were the results of it? Like, great, cool, you just listened to me go on about all these wonderful things that I did, and welcome to the Julian Club, but most people who do, you guys are all meeting me for the first time, but I'm actually very uncomfortable with saying, like, look at me, I did this. So this is the first, and thank you very much for listening. But I can say confidently that on paper, this style and this approach had its benefits. While normally this information is so shared in numbers and percentages, I purposely removed it at the last minute from my presentation. Because as a woman who is always questioned, always critiqued, always double, triple, oh my god, I forgot the terminology, checked, double, triple checked if what I'm saying is actually true. Now, because I removed the numbers, you're just gonna have to take my word for it. So we came back this summer, and when I compared our books from last summer, we saw an increase in sales per shift. Almost every shift on average, we did better than the previous year, and I believe also the year before that as well. We had an increase in per person average. So every person who came in and sat down over the entire month spent more money, had a higher bill. But this was not, this didn't affect our tips. Similar to America, our wages are through tipping, and when we look through our average daily and monthly tips that we received, that number, that percentage also raised. The other thing that we saw raised that I don't have listed here is that the majority of our guests are through reservations. And the day after you've come and sat down at La Otra, you are sent a survey. And the results in our survey were also increasingly positive than the years previous. So we just kept on hitting these new benchmarks over and over again through this new staff. A majority of them had never worked in a cocktail bar before. A majority of them were in and out of the city looking for apartments during this time, looking at a place to live so they could come work here. And on top of all of that, we had an increase in hourly earnings. The numbers were there, and it's not just that every person made more money per hour, we had more hours that were slipped for money per hour. And that was a 15 to 20 shekel increase depending on the month. And that's huge. We had the most amount of hours we'd ever worked ever as a staff, and the most amount of shifts that we'd ever worked ever over the summer, and that month also coincided with the highest tips, like hourly earnings our staff made. It goes to show you that, like, I gave in this level of commitment and they matched it. They felt supportive. They came into work to rock. And I need to say this out loud. I don't want to take this away from them. This isn't my accomplishment. This is 100% their accomplishment, and they did a fucking fantastic job. So, that's all great. We went over my story, what happened in La Otra, and this is just one bar in the Middle East, in a country and in a town that I'm assuming most of you have never been to. So you're like, okay, why do you care? Why is this relevant to you? And honestly, the research is there. I found that according to Harvard Business and McKinsey and Company, these three major things. Women are more effective leaders. This is through surveys. This is across all industries. And while I'm always told not to put this many words on the slide, I just thought it was really important that I get the exact quote so that you guys see that I'm not fibbing you, I'm not shitting you guys. This is Harvard Business Review. Women are stronger leaders, and the well-being of employees matter. Now, I found this last week, and the things that I did were just a gut instinct. I just felt like it was what I needed to do. we were in unprecedented times, so I needed to do something that we had never done before, that I'd never seen happen before, and it was ad hoc, it was in the moment, it was this natural snowball effect, and only when I sat down after my proposal to do this was accepted, I realized that there were clear consistencies and there was clear pillars that I was exemplifying and living and doing. And this comes to the well-being of employees matter. I'm always told not to read what's on the slide, but I'm going to read this quote because I think it's really important that I say this out loud. When managers support employee well-being, employees are happier, less burned out, and less likely to consider leaving. The same is true of employees who have strong allies and believe DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a high priority for their company. In this same publication, there are clear results showing that women do this better. They just do. They took a survey of a vast amount of corporations, and the current employees of those corporations answered these questions. There's no reason why corporations in a different industry, this shouldn't be reflected in our industry. If you guys are interested in finding the link for this, I have this for you guys. I found it an extremely interesting read to go through. I was pleasantly surprised, I was floored, I was inspired, and I think that, sorry, I lost my train of thought, to be perfectly honest. I think that we need to learn from this, and we need to do better, and that everything I did or everything that I can do is apparently naturally found in every other woman. More so than not, there's apparently other women and throughout and across all sects and all industries that have gone through a similar experience that I have, and through that produce similar results. And that just can't be a coincidence. I thank you guys very much for listening to me. I would love to hear questions, comments, concerns from you guys as well.
So thank you very much for that. Folks, any questions for Julia Bella? Well, I'll have questions. Sitting off to the side.
Thanks, Julian. Amazing presentation. A big question, because now you're heading back to Philadelphia now. So what is the one big takeaway from everything that you just went through in Israel, your journey? What's the one big takeaway that you're bringing back with you to Philadelphia that will stick with you forever?
That's a really great question. To have just one takeaway, I don't think does what I've learned justice, but I think that I can say, I'm sorry, I'm like putting myself in the microphone, in the headset, and it's distracting me. I think that without being too corny and oversaid, like the sky's the limit. Like there's so many things that you think you can't do, and if I can move halfway around the world, country whose language I don't speak, and find success in what I do, then so can you. And all the things that you are afraid of taking the next step forward, you shouldn't be afraid of. Like I have a huge fear of disappointment, and despite that, honestly, whatever you're not taking the next step of doing, you're not going to be disappointed in that you can do it.
Can I ask one follow-up question? One follow-up question to that, because I think it's amazing what you just said. I think it's important for everyone to hear, men, women, whomever. What do you plan to do in Philadelphia? That's the big burning question. Are you going to run a bar? Are you going to join the industry in a different way? Like, what's your plan?
Thank you. That is something that's still up for debate. I'm still debating it for myself. I am about to finish my degree, and I've started my second degree. Like I said, I started school before. I stopped that. I went back. I've pursued my degree in hospitality management, And I'm going to spend some time concentrating on that, concentrating on my mental health, something that I think everybody needs to actively do. I feel like we listen to these lovely presentations. Oh, that is something actually that I forgot to mention. Thank you for bringing it up. I'll kind of go on a side tangent. I think it's just really important to take part in, recognize that it's part of our day-to-day, that all of us are probably struggling in one way or another, and that we really need to be like radically accepting of that, and listen to ourselves, listen to our body, listen to what we're doing. And so that's what I'm doing for myself. I don't have my next exact step planned. I'm listening to myself.
Any other questions? I have questions. I mean, what I often find in smaller groups is that there's a degree of tribal knowledge. You talked about the fact that it was a lot of traditions and unspoken rules and things like that, and that it can go because people leave and people forget why things are being done and things weren't written down, etc. Was documenting this new process? I mean, if you left the bar now with a proper training regimen and things like that?
Yeah, so a role learner who has his own digital presentation that I believe went up yesterday, I think he told me, is the person I work most closely with. He is now the beverage director of the Imperial Group, and one of the first things that he said to me when we were our first or second meeting was, write everything down. We talked about like what you can take away from this. Whatever you think of doing, whatever you've already done, if you don't have it written down, maybe not today, but definitely tomorrow, take that 15, 20 minutes, an hour, however much time you need, to write down what you've been doing and what you plan on doing so that it doesn't get lost. Because, yeah, that's what I needed to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like start today because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely.
And also with management, I mean, you expressed that you really wanted to be the best bartender you could, etc. Was management a logical step for you for that, or?
Definitely. I don't know if it was because of like lack of representation, or feeling like I needed to be recognized. I didn't know any other way to be recognized since I am not one of the bartenders who compete. We have a really strong competition culture in Tel Aviv and in Israel, and that just never drew to me. That was never something that I really loved or sought out. I have an immense amount of respect for it, but it's just not my calling. And I felt overlooked a lot, and I think I looked for outside like verification and outside approval. I'm now a little bit older than I was when I initially put kind of that goal on my non-existent like dream board, my imaginary dream board, but I've realized that I really don't need that outside approval, and that I really am capable, intelligent, not just bartender, but employee and friend, etc. But I believe that having that management title for a really long time for me was like outside approval. Yeah.
Folks, any more questions? Thank you so much for sharing this today. Folks, Julian and Robbins.